On the question of the relevance of Ambedkar, um, I myself think that there is a great deal in Ambedkar's writings that have not been seriously studied so far. As far as the wider world of scholarship on Indian politics and Indian political thinking is concerned. I mean, the Ambedkar scholarship itself is still fairly small. You can think of maybe half a dozen scholars who have really seriously studied and written on Ambedkar. I mean, and there is a great deal. Ambedkar was, I think, certainly among the major political leadership in India, one of the most erudite and genuinely academic people. I mean, it's very hard to find people with the same kind of academic accomplishments. I mean, there are almost nobody to match that kind of academic accomplishment. And yet, he's simply relegated as a Dalit leader. I think there's a great deal in Ambedkar which is not simply confined to just what on the Dalit question. There's a great deal that Ambedkar has written. So, in terms of his relevance, in terms of the politics, now this is not for me to judge, but surely there are many things that have happened in India since Ambedkar's death. Even the Dalit movement has moved into directions which Ambedkar might never have foreseen. There are all of these questions about, for instance, the sorts of things we have talked about. What about differentiations within the Dalits? What about the question of the actual emergence of a Dalit middle class and the relationship of the Dalit middle class with the rest of the Dalits? What are the roles of that the Dalit middle class might play? These are questions that Ambedkar did not actually say because they had not yet happened in his time. So on a lot of things, I'm sure the situation has moved beyond Ambedkar's time, and in that respect, completely new kinds of thinking have become possible. But as an intellectual figure and a figure in the history of the Indian political movement, I think Ambedkar has not been adequately studied. I think there's a great deal there which remains to be investigated. On the question about the use of caste names and so on, now I'm not sure whether there is one single position on this, because there are many places in India where there have been in fact organized moves to drop the caste name altogether. On the other hand, it is also true that caste identification is a part of the general public identification of citizens, because caste identification is part of the entitlements of different groups of citizens in India. So if one belongs to, let us say, a scheduled caste, one has a specific set of entitlements, and if one does not, then one does not have those entitlements. So, this is not something which is simply kept in the background or just kept under the carpet. In a sense, dropping caste names altogether, if the argument was that everyone will be treated equally and therefore there should not be any sign, right, that will display one's caste identity, then that's one thing. But that is not, the caste name is not the only thing that displays your identity. There are so many other things. Just by talking to somebody, you get to know what that person was. And if that were to happen, then in a sense it seems probably more honest to say, well, yes, I am such and such and I come from this caste. You see, there was a time when displaying the caste name actually meant claiming a certain privilege. I'm not sure that that is necessarily the case anymore. You don't necessarily gain a privilege. At least most public spaces, you don't gain a privilege. The question of marriage and so on is a much more complicated.
But even in fact, on this question, the lower middle class may well turn up and say, "Sala to bomb mane."
That is true.
I mean, they speak with very great delicacy.
That is true. But it's interesting that in many parts of India, Bengal, for instance, I know this very well, that for many people from the Dalit caste, the opportunity of migration into the cities, and especially in Bengal because of the partition, because there was such a large-scale migration, and many people migrated from rural areas in East Bengal into or around the city of Calcutta, where people become anonymous. People don't necessarily know where you are from. And it was possible for many people, and we know from a lot of anecdotal evidence, that people actually then drop their lower caste names or names that signify a lower caste and simply adopt a neutral name, right? And then your caste identity is not displayed anymore. So it becomes a way of a certain kind of social mobility. Now within the Dalit movement, many people object to this. They're saying you're leaving our caste, and yeah, this is a kind of Sanskritization that is going on.
Also, indirectly recognizing by taking an upper caste name.
Exactly.
That there is something of what we call superior about that name.
That is right. But on the other hand, for many people, I mean, I know families like that who, by in another generation or two, their original caste identification is almost completely gone. They have merged into a kind of urban, broadly upper caste kind of culture. They just merge into it. There are very interesting examples in Bengal, for instance. If you look at the census figures, for some very large Dalit castes, the actual absolute numbers have gone down from one census to another. Now this could not be possible. There is no natural decline of birth rate. This is simply because people in the next generation or in the next census are not claiming they are Dalit anymore.
At least the surnames.
Even census declaration, they are not claiming that they are Dalit. So this may be some kind of social mobility going on here.
Also, this is a form of sensitization.
Exactly, it is a form of sensitization.
Okay.
So now it's very hard to make a moral judgment on which is the right way to proceed. But both of those things are happening.
So thanks a lot, Partha. On my behalf, I learned a bit.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
on behalf of my students who will go on listening to this interview.
No, thank you.